What is up, English students? Mr. Bucket here. Today we're going to talk about A Doll's House. Henrik Ibsen. Yes, Henrik Ibsen, not Henrik Ibsen. He's Norwegian. Henrik Ibsen's play about feminism and realism. And we're going to cover Act 1 today, just talk about the basic stuff that happened. So let's get started. Let's get this bread. As you all most likely know, Act 1 is where we handle exposition. We meet characters, establish a setting. And in the very beginning of Act 1, we meet two very important characters, probably the most two important characters to the play. That is Nora Helmer and her husband, Torvald. Nora and Torvald have a very, what we would call, traditional relationship for 1879. Namely, Nora handles the house and the children and basically the entire emotional weight of the entire relationship, and Torvald works. Also, Torvald apparently gets to tell her what candies she's allowed to eat, although Nora sneaks some, which I feel. Anyway, we open with Nora and Torvald having this long conversation about upcoming Christmas and about how this will be the first Christmas where they won't have to pinch pennies, how they won't have to budget very carefully. The room is described that they're in is described as a comfortable and nice room, but not expensive, not bougie. And we can tell by a lot of this, by the dialogue and by the setting, that the Helmers are an okay off family who maybe hope to be well off soon, but they're not rich. They have had to really scrimp and save with money. And you can tell that Nora is bothered by that for some reason. And Torvald is telling, Torvald calls her his little lark, his little squirrel. He calls her spendthrift. He has a lot of these little nicknames for her, which my students very rightfully have said sound a lot more like how a father talks to a daughter than how a partner would talk to their other partner, to equal adults. It's not really the case. Torvald sees himself as the only adult in the relationship, clearly, and Nora as this little plaything that is cute and funny, but wouldn't be someone you would ever put in charge of anything. And Nora, well, for the most part, accepts her position there for the moment. During this conversation, Torvald also makes it known he is disgusted by the idea of borrowing money. He says that something of beauty and something of freedom are lost when you borrow money to start a family or to start as a foundation for your life together. He hates it. He's absolutely against it. And Nora drops it pretty quickly. Really early on in this, the primary characteristic we notice about Nora is her concern with money, namely that she wants money. When Torvald offers her money, he says, "You know what I have for her?" She spins around quickly, clapping her hands, "Money!" And he gives her money. We don't really know what this is for, other than he seems to think that she goes and spends it on the house and the children, what he calls frivolities, and never on herself. It's about this moment that Mrs. Lind comes in, Nora's old friend Christine, and they've had very different lives. They were childhood friends. They knew each other for a very long time, but now Mrs. Lind looks like an old lady to her. Nora doesn't recognize her immediately, and when she comes in, she is startled to realize that this is the same woman that she grew up being friends with. The reason why Christine, Mrs. Lind, is looking so haggard at this moment is that she's had a much rougher go of it. She had to, she was taking care and providing for her mother and her children, and which is to say her mother's children, not her children. She didn't have kids at this point. She was taking care of, her younger brothers and her mother, who was very sick, and the bills were mounting up, and eventually a man with money proposed to her, and she said she felt like she couldn't say no. She felt like it would be selfish to say no. So she married a man that she pretty much felt nothing for. After her mother died and her brothers grew up and got jobs of their own, then the man that she was married to died, and she tells Nora she felt nothing over this because she had really no affection for the man. And when he died, Nora supposes that maybe that felt like freedom, but Christine says, no, just a great emptiness. She has no one to live for now. And we can already see here a subtle criticism of the way that society tells women that they must live for someone, right? Nora is living for Torvald and the children. Christine had her husband that she didn't care about, who she was living for after her mother and her younger brothers. And now she feels the need to fill that hole rather than go and do something that she would enjoy, that she wants. We also see a little bit of Nora's immaturity here, saying to Christine, "No, I don't want to be selfish. I want to talk about you," and proceeding to talk about herself for 2 pages. After that, when she gets back on track, Mrs. Lind tells her all of her troubles. Mrs. Lind points out, to Nora, rightfully so, that she's acting a bit childish. She literally calls her a child. And Nora feels the need to point out that she has a secret. She's been hinting so far that she has a secret all this time. And she reveals that Torvald got sick, and the doctor said that the only cure for this was a year-long trip to the south of Europe into Italy, namely to better weather. It sounds more like these were travel agents than doctors, but regardless, she says to Torvald that she got the money from her father shortly before he died, but we find out through this conversation that she borrowed it under her own name, which, interestingly, women are not allowed to borrow without their husband's permission. More on that later. Christine's a bit scandalized, but she's got business to do. She's here to get a job. She's hoping that with Nora's husband, with Torvald's promotion in the bank, that he will be able to get her a job. It's at this moment that Dr. Rank comes in, our good friend. Dr. Rank only comes in to talk to Nora after he is kicked out of the study by this lawyer named Krogstad. More about him in a little bit as well. We generally get a slimy feel for Krogstad immediately. Nora is not happy to see him immediately. And there's some familiarity between the two that Nora is quick to cover up. Anyway, Dr. Rank comes out. He's there to talk to Nora. He's very excited to talk to Nora. We pretty quickly get the feeling that he has feelings for Nora, despite his sort of just one of the girls attitude while joining the conversation between him and Mrs. Lind. He, unlike Torvald, actually listens to Nora. When he meets Mrs. Lind, he immediately says, we've heard about you many times, where later Torvald barely knows her and the name doesn't ring a bell to him. We quickly get the hint that Dr. Rank is not in good health, that he's not feeling well. He may actually be dying. He also gives us some important backstory on Krogstad. Krogstad is a slimy individual with no moral character, according to Dr. Rank. Nora also finds out that Mrs. Lind seems to have some kind of history with Krogstad that we don't really find out much the nature of. It's very mysterious. Eventually, Krogstad, Dr. Rank, and Torvald all get ready to leave, and the children run in. And we get this nice scene where Nora's greeting all of them, and we see that she is a dutiful and affectionate mother. Torvald predictably says, "This place is unbearable for anyone but mothers. Come on, let's leave." What a great dad. And pretty much immediately after everyone leaves, and after Nora gets done playing with the children, Krogstad comes back in. And we find out a little bit more of Nora's secrets here. It turns out she didn't borrow from just any bank. She borrowed from Krogstad, a sort of duplicitous man. And Krogstad reveals that he's in a position of power over Nora. First of all, Krogstad now works for Torvald, and Krogstad is about to be fired, ironically, because he's so morally ambiguous. But he tells Nora that he actually has some power over her and that she needs to help him keep his job. Because Nora, who's good-hearted, doesn't have a lot of experience in the business world. She doesn't quite understand. She thinks, well, Torvald's his boss. I can fire him. I can get him fired and nothing bad will happen. And, Mrs. Lind can take that job and everybody's happy except Krogstad, but he sucks anyway, so whatever. But Krogstad points out to her that actually she may have done something illegal. You see, the document that she signed to borrow the money, she needed a man to sign with her, either her husband or her father. Her husband was very sick, couldn't sign, and, we find out from Torvald, wouldn't sign. So she goes to her father, and her father did sign, supposedly. And Krogstad points out, actually, her father died in late September. And the date that was signed with his name was October 2nd. Turns out Nora forged it. Now, Nora doesn't understand that is illegal, that she could go to jail for this. She thinks it's just a little detail and not a big deal. This is why she didn't bother to change the date. She didn't think anyone would double check it. She didn't think it was important. Anyway, Krogstad points out to her, hey, you let me keep my job, help me keep my job, convince your husband to not fire me, or I'm sending you to jail, with the side effect of probably ruining your marriage. So later, Nora comes to Torvald and she says, hey, Krogstad, what's the deal with him? And we find out that Torvald absolutely despises the man for his moral problems, the fact that he's not morally upright in his view. And so when she asks him not to fire Krogstad, Torvald lets her know, I will have no dealings with that man. In fact, he says, can you imagine even being connected with that man? It must infect you with moral decay. It infects every aspect of your life. And when someone is a part of that, especially a mother, it even infects the children. It ruins everything. It corrupts and it completely destroys a family's life together. Nora absorbs all of this with complete horror. And later, after in a kind of horrible mirror of what we saw earlier, when the children want to play with her, she actually refuses and tells Anne-Marie, the nurse, to keep them away from her, that she's terrified now that she's going to completely ruin the children due to her connection with Krogstad. And that's where we end Act 1, with Nora completely terrified and feeling helpless, manipulated and helpless around her. We're going to see her change and take control of her situation as things go, but that's where we end with Act 1. I hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you later.